The May 22nd, 2018 meeting of the City Council of the City of Fredericksburg. We will be led in invocation this evening by Councilor Matthew Kelly, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Please stand.
Most merciful Father, please bring peace to those in distress and comfort to those in pain. Please be with our men and women in uniform, both home and abroad, and bring them home safely to their families. Please help us make decisions that benefit the entire Fredericksburg community, and of course, always remind us that we are here to serve and not be served. In your name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Play ball.
Thank you. We have a presentation this evening recognizing Linda Bailey for 24 years of service. Would Linda please come forward? I think half the crowd here would like to be up here hugging you. What? Oh, butterfly and all? I ain't got a butterfly. I'll have to get one. She's going to give me one right now. All right, now we're ready. Whereas Linda Bailey began working for the Department of Parks and Recreation as a part-time nature specialist in 1994. And whereas, she must have been 12. And whereas the Earth Day Festival at Alum Spring Park was originally started by Linda Bailey in 2003 with 200 attendees, having now grown to a collaborative effort of 12 agencies and 75 volunteers that featured 86 organizations and vendors, hands-on activities, live music and food to over 6,000 attendees. And whereas Linda Bailey became the full-time nature education coordinator in 2008 to accommodate the ever-increasing popularity of the nature programs offered by the Parks and Recreation Department. And whereas Mott's Run Reservoir was an underutilized resource for the community, offering only fishing and some boat rental, until Linda Bailey, with the assistance of volunteers and community organizations, established hiking trails, an orienteering course, a lakefront amphitheater, the Hideout natural play area for children, and a log cabin nature filled with stuffed animals, hands-on activities, educational materials, and Pocket, the 21-year-old corn snake. And, you know, every respectable cabin has one. That's right. Whereas Linda has served as the National Association of Interpreters Deputy Director and Director for Region 2, the Chesapeake region, has presented educational sessions at both the regional and national conferences, and was awarded the Outstanding Frontline Interpreter in 2008, the Outstanding Interpretive Manager in 2008, and the Meritorious Service Award in March of 2018. And whereas the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Events now offers as many as 151 nature programs and 11 weeks of summer camp each year, and more than 110,000 people have participated in these programs as 24 years, and 50,000 people have visited the Mott's Run Nature Center. And whereas Linda has actively served in leadership roles in the Boy Scouts and Friends of the Rappahannock since she and her husband Carrington moved to Fredericksburg in 1994. Now, therefore, I, Mary Catherine Greenlaw, Mayor of the City of Fredericksburg, on behalf of the City Council, on this 22nd day of May 2018, do hereby recognize Linda D. Bailey for her many contributions to the Fredericksburg region by allowing us to become better educated and better stewards of our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have to say, I'm stunned. Jane was asking me all this stuff like, how many this and how many that? And Jane is such a great mentor and director. But I just want to say I am the lucky one. I mean, Carrie and I have lived here for 24 years, and we have been blessed, and I am the lucky one. Not all of you, I am. I've been doing what I love for 100 years, and I'm ready to go out to Oregon and do it again. But it will never be like Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg is an awesome community, and if you ever doubt that, just look around you. There's some tremendous people running the show here. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Dan.
We do indeed.
Thank you so much.
Everybody get pictures. Lovely way to start the evening. We have one public hearing this evening. Madam Clerk, will you read item 5A?
This public hearing is granting a 10-year with 3 options for 5-year renewals upon mutual agreement, non-exclusive franchise to Cox Wireless Access, LLC, for wireless infrastructure in the public rights-of-way.
Thank you. Now, I need to read the following. The City Council is considering the award of a franchise for the use of public rights-of-way for installation and operation of wireless facilities. The procedure for the award of a franchise is prescribed by state law as follows. Summary of the bids received, call for further bids, closing of bidding, staff recommendation, remarks from bidder, award of franchise. The city has received 1 bid from Cox Wireless Access LLC for such a franchise. Are there any further bids for this franchise? Hearing none, I declare the bidding closed. Is there a staff recommendation, Mr. King?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there,
Cox Wireless Access LLC is the recommendation, and I will proceed with that recommendation and announce that.
yeah, but I have to call on the representative of Cox first. And
Yes,
then,
the
and then-
Cox representative.
Is there a representative of Cox
Mr.
Wireless?
Mr. Eric Berry is in the audience.
Okay, so, all right, we will proceed with the staff recommendation, and then there will be a time for questions of the staff and of Mr. Berry. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mr. King?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. Cox Wireless Access LLC is seeking a franchise to install and operate their small cell facilities within the city of rights-of-way. Various small cell franchise license agreements have been previously approved by City Council, and Cox Wireless Access is seeking a similar franchise agreement with the city. As you may be aware, small cell installations are primarily accomplished by installing small antennas on top of existing poles, or where that's not practical, installing separate poles for these wireless facilities. So far, there have been about a dozen small cell facilities installed around the city under previously approved franchise agreements and license agreements, and all of these have been installed via a co-located process on existing utility poles. Cox Wireless is currently not submitting any plans for locating small cell facilities in the city. They have not submitted specific plans or specific locations. They are currently just seeking the approval of the franchise agreement before they do that. When they submit plans, those installations will be governed by the city's new right-of-way use ordinance and small cell design guidelines. Cox Wireless intends to allow existing wireless carriers such as Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, T-Mobile, and others to use its small cell facilities rather than to operate its own Cox-branded service. Small cell telecommunications infrastructure has generally been found to be a win-win for the city. Small cells help the city to achieve its goal of being the fastest broadband city in Virginia, while also minimizing the visual impacts that are caused by the massive monopole towers that you may be accustomed to in different areas around the region. Again, this helps us with our goal 29, council goal of being the fastest broadband city in Virginia. The approval of the franchise agreement for Cox Wireless requires a public hearing, and the ordinance must be approved by two readings. Again, staff is recommending to City Council approve a 10-year non-exclusive franchise for Cox Wireless to install and operate small cell facilities within the public rights-of-way to further the city's goal in being the fastest broadband city in Virginia. And with that, I will open up to questions of the council.
Councilor Devine?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess because we don't really have a lot of specifics here, is there a number of the co-location, is there a number that we're looking at as far as in the next 5 years, 10 years, since it's a 10-year lease? Is there a number that we are aiming for or that Cox has in mind that we would be approving?
That would be a question I would defer to Mr. Berry for that.
Mr. Berry?
Madam Mayor, council members, currently, the way that Cox operates throughout the nation, I handle these for them. We like to apply for the license and the application to understand the process within the community we're about to develop. So Cox is here as a standard cable company and provide different services through the community. We don't have, our customers are Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. So to date, I don't have a bill plan or an obligation to any of those wireless carriers. I'd rather understand the processes within the community, where things should go, how they should look, make sure I have a licensing ability to put a customer in place, then go to the customer and say, okay, we can operate within the city, within Fredericksburg. Rather than coming to you and say, I have to build 100 widgets by the end of the year, and it's gonna come to August, and I have to try and forcefully put them in the right of way. We don't generally operate that way. So a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plan is not how we develop that like a standard wireless carrier. Since we're an infrastructure provider, majority of Cox fibers are in the right of way, coax is in the right of way today, it serves homes, serves businesses. So our infrastructure that's existing lends itself for the wireless industry to utilize for small cell. So we take a little bit different approach than probably general industry. We don't run in with a plan to try and blanket or false hope that we're gonna blanket the city with multiple small cells versus understanding how they fit within the community, where they fit, and then ask for those applications to apply to the ordinance and the codes that are applicable.
So if I can just follow up. So I guess it just feels a little bit funny to just have a blank check, and that's what it feels like. So that, and so your applications will come in piecemeal,
But
I guess?
it's not a blank check. It's an authorization to build sites in the right of way. But every single site still has to go through the permitting process, which is the authorization to be in the right of way. So therefore, if we came in and said we wanted to build 10 right now, well, next year I might come back and say I want to build 30. So it's either knowing what the build plan is up front, or coming in and applying and let the Public Works and the permitting division actually review and approve those applications, rather than expecting to see 100 sites up front and saying, okay, you're only gonna see 100 sites, you're gonna go away. Cox is a little bit different, being that we supply for all 4 of the carriers. So we could have 10 from Verizon, we could have 15 from T-Mobile, we're not sure, right? We don't know until they develop or they want to deploy the technology in the community. So it's not a blank check in that state, it's just a matter of saying, these are the insurances, these are the obligations, and what you have to do to perform within our community. You can't just come throw garbage in our right of way. It's more to say this is the process, this is the policy, and this is the payments and the structure in order to build something organized in our right of way. And every single application that you make actually has to go through the authority to review and approve those locations, rather than just saying, have 100 sites and they're supposed to look like this, and then you show up and they look a little bit different.
So each individual site has a series of approvals it has to go through,
Absolutely right.
as far as location, appearance,
Paint?
everything that our ordinances require.
Yes,
Right,
Absolutely.
yes.
okay.
So definitely not a blank check, not an open-ended number. Definitely a planned and coordinated effort to make sure that we're deploying. We do this in multiple cities, and it's the same process we take everywhere with our business model.
And this is similar to what we did before, I can't remember the company, Access?
So
Mobility?
Mobility is an infrastructure provider. Crown Castle, Extenet, Zayo, there's lots of different infrastructure providers. Cox Wireless Access is just an affiliate of Cox Communications. But in order not to blur the lines and make sure we have a division of revenues that would be paid to the city, Cox Wireless franchises, so you can really look into those numbers and see that that money is truly being paid as obligated versus being blended into regular business that you may collect funds from today.
Okay,
So it's a division.
thank you. Councilor Devine?
So I guess I just want to understand, in a city this size, in order to meet the needs of our residents, how many units, or I'm not even sure what to refer to them as, but how many units would more than likely be placed here?
I don't have an answer, unfortunately, because I don't know what the wireless carriers themselves have obligated to, say, a mobility, say themselves, AT&T or Verizon developing here on their behalf, or what may come in Cox's direction in the next year to 2 years. I don't know because we're not the service provider. We're just the infrastructure provider, so therefore when they call on us to provide fiber or an attachment in the city because our fiber runs right there in the right of way, instead of having to tear up 3 or 4 city blocks to bring in new fiber or infrastructure, we're already there more than likely through your community. So a little bit less disturbance is why we get invited to help augment their needs. I don't have an answer because we're not the service provider. So within the 4, I mean, you could have 100 within a year, you could have 200 within a year. I don't know what their plans are for the community itself directly. I don't know. I don't want to make an assumption.
Okay.
I'm not sure what mobility presented, for Sprint. I know that's 90% of their bill plan, and I'm not sure what they're carrying for other customers, so I'm not sure.
I don't either. Mr. King?
Well, we have, just to let you know, we have 5 locations that have been submitted by Mobility, and we're reviewing those. One is in the Downtown Historic District, and that's up for a CPERC review approval on June 6th. The others are outside the Historic District. Extenet, I believe we have a dozen or so of those locations already installed at their request. Or they have installed those at their request throughout the city. So it's been fairly minimal to this point from the providers that we've either licensed or given franchise agreements to for the installations around the city.
Mm-hmm. And these are the small boxes, right?
That is correct, and that is part of the ordinance that we worked on with council a year or so ago,
Right.
where we've limited the size of things like the antenna structures to a total of 6 cubic feet in volume for the antennas, 28 cubic feet for their electronic facilities attached to the poles. Basically 1 antenna per pole. So we have gotten in front of this. We know this is something that was coming to Fredericksburg at some point in time, and other communities are still kind of trying to catch up. I think the city has done a good job of getting in front of it and putting the guidelines in place ahead of time so that when something like this came to the city, that we're in a good position to review and approve those locations in accordance with our adopted guidelines.
Okay. Vice Mayor Withers?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When you say review, if an application comes in for a certain, let's say in the historic district, so do you have a say, or does the city have a say on whether or not that antenna can go there or cannot go there, or how does that work?
The way that works, it goes through the City and Public Utility Review Committee, CPERC, and that process involves, the committee is made up of the Director of Public Works, the Director of Planning, and the building official, a member of the ARB, and a member of the Planning Commission.
Right.
Those are the members of CPERC who receive and review those proposals within the historic district. Those meetings are open to the public. We announce those as a public meeting. It's somewhat of a technical meeting because we do talk about the technical aspects of these various installations in the downtown. Notifications are required for adjacent property owners, which is what we've done on the most recent application in the 1000 block of Charles Street. And we welcome comments from the public for that. In that particular case, this is actually the second time that particular installation is coming to CPERC. Under the first at the first meeting for that installation, there was concern about the pole location and the pole height. That has now been changed. Actually, they had the applicant had submitted a standalone pole. We have now convinced them that it's better to go with a co-location on an existing pole that would need to be changed out for a somewhat taller pole, but still within the guidelines or requirements of the historic district. It'll be below 40 feet. So that process is working, and yes, there is availability for the public to weigh in.
Was that the pole that was originally set on the corner of Charles and Amelia?
It was near that corner,
Yeah,
correct?
okay.
Right.
So I understand how the procedure works, and I guess the reason I asked, can we say, and obviously we want these cells in Fredericksburg. I mean, it's not a question of that, but in the sensitive area in the downtown historic district, do we really have a say about, you can't put it here, you need to put it somewhere else? Can we legally do that?
Under certain guidelines and the regulations that we're authorized to work under, yes.
And we can limit the number and say in a block on a pole? Or?
Don't believe that we can limit the number per block necessarily. It's purely a design guideline. And we do try, obviously we would want to space them out and work, and typically the applicant that we're working with so far has been very cooperative as far as location goes. I would not anticipate having multiple locations in the same block, but to this point, all the applicants we've been working with have been very cooperative in that.
And the franchise is 10 years, I believe, is that right? So I guess if they didn't cooperate with us in 10 years, we could always not renew the franchise. That's a long time to wait, but, okay, all right. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilor Fry?
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. I guess I'll direct my question to you, Mr. King. Is when you guys look at locations, I'm sitting here listening, even from when I was reading, and I remember last year when we set, like what you said, we set it up earlier. It seems easy to me discussing it because the city is surrounded by a lot of different zoning options. So of course your first issue would be residential and what's in front of somebody's house, so on and so forth. But we're surrounded so much by commercial, CT, and all kinds of different zoning. Are we considering where we're putting them? Like, because every neighborhood has some type of commercial around it. It just makes more sense if they're located near the commercial area. So is that how the process has been going? Or if you say you need something downtown, it just kind of, to me, it's kind of like a common sense thing where there's a train station. It should be something near the train station instead of on Caroline Street, or if it's, I'm just trying to think of a few examples. If it's Brayhead, put it by Paul's Bakery. I'm just, is that the way it works, or is it not?
I think the answer to your question is somewhat in Mr. Berry's area to discuss. But I will tell you, when an applicant comes to us to suggest here is an area where we have a need for the communication. We don't generally generate that on our end from the city. We don't tell them where the dead zones are, the locations where the communications are needed. It generally comes from the carriers. But when they have come to us, and again, using the downtown Charles Street as an example, we do try to work with them They generally have a degree of flexibility within that area, and if we suggest, hey, instead of at this location, we'd rather go here, maybe between a property line or not in front of a historic building or something like that, and they've been willing to accommodate that. But as far as specific locations like Upper Lafayette Boulevard or train station or something like that, that's not something that we generally drive at this point. That's more from the carriers.
And just to add to that, small cell, unlike the traditional tall monopoles you've seen or the taller towers that have 4 and 5 different folks wired to them, small cell, being at the lower elevation due to the vegetation and things around here, limits the ability of the effectiveness of that site. Versus a taller tower, a couple 100 feet tall, you can shoot wherever you want. Small cell is so much shorter, so much lower power, that it really needs to be where it's planned, where it can move one way or the other just by a couple 100 feet. It couldn't move a block, half block away, or that site would just no longer exist, because they're very focused to fix the capacity issue that you're having in that area. So they shouldn't be just sprinkling these up and down the streets because you might not have ever allowed sites within the historic district before. These should be spaced out for sure, and they should be covering a focused area, is the point of the small cell.
Okay. And I want to be clear too. I'm not trying to throw these all in the parking lot of Paul's Bakery. I know I just said that, but I was just trying to think of an example. All right, thank you.
All right. Councilor Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I understand it, and this was what this is, it's a basic decision is coverage and how much area. The smaller they are, and the lower they are, the less coverage they have. And we basically made a trade-off. We could have the big, huge, giant towers that everybody looks at, who can cover a huge area, and we can have just one big tower that looks like a pine tree sitting on Route 3, which everybody gawks at. Or we made the decision that we wanted them smaller in here. So part of this is really a matter of location is important because you're trying to cover a specific area. It doesn't have to do with zoning or anything else. It's just a matter of we need this to cover this area. And because we have decided as a community we don't want the big towers, we want the small ones, frankly, we've got to give up a little bit to make sure we get the coverage. Am I off on that?
And to add to that, it's about capacity, because those big towers, that pine tree you see away is going to make your 911 connection, always, right? These smaller sites that infill in between are what's going to give you, I like to make emails and phone calls. That's about what I do with my phone, even though I've been doing this for 20-something years. But it gives the other folks their experience that they're looking for, instant connectivity, which the gratification of that is videos and driving directions and things like that, whatever it is, FaceTiming their children at night as they're traveling through your community for business. The small cell is placed for capacity specifically first. It's to offload that macro site to make sure that you can get that user experience that the carriers all advertise, right? And then beyond that, it does implement and it enhances 911 and emergency services as they're using routing for ambulances and you're using your computer tops in your cars for police and patrolmen, things like that. It's there so that they can make those connections faster. But at the end of the day, the coverage for your whole community technically is still those big, what we call gaudy towers that all started back in the 80s, right? Those are still the primary focus of what's going to serve the community. These are to enhance the experience of the visitors and the residents within the community is the point.
Thank you.
For sure.
Okay. So are we clear? Council, do you have any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Berry.
Thank you.
There may be questions from the audience, and I may ask you to answer them if summarized, okay? Is there anyone here? This is a public hearing. If you would like to speak to this matter, please come to the podium and state your name and address and confine your remarks to 5 minutes or less. And Mr. Berry, I believe there's someone who wants to come.
Thank you. Harriet Rowe, 1238 Brent Street, Fredericksburg. I appreciate Councilwoman Devine's blank check comment, but in working on another planning commission, I discovered that the federal government governs these towers. And about all that the cities were left with were the aesthetics. They couldn't come in and just plop them down and then drive off. We could say that looks ugly, make it look like a tree, or put some shrubs around it or short trees. We could govern the sound if it was too loud for the neighborhood. We could require that they put some sort of covering on it so it was not loud. So you're really limited a lot by the federal government. But I would like to see this city council be sure to hold these people's feet to the fire And if they give a suggestion, check to see if it's the only one. And I'm gonna give you as an example, that bottle brush tree out there on Route 1. There are so many trees that are put around cell towers. You can walk by them or drive by them and not even know it's a tree. And as an example, we had citizens who complained about one being put in the neighborhood, and there was a little wooded area. And my husband and I drove by that thing several times. We got out of our car and could not tell, because they didn't use the bottle bush tree. They used the trees that are available. They're more expensive, but they fit the neighborhoods better. So this is the kind of stuff I would like to see you all, check. And if they say, well, we have to put the tower, and this is the kind we have to put in, and this is the way it has to look, I hope you say, no, we need some more input on that.
Thank you, Ms. Rowe. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, then I will declare the public hearing closed. If Mr. Berry or Mr. King would like to make a final comment, I think the whole purpose of our ordinance and what we have set up and what we're trying to get ahead of this curve is to do precisely what Ms. Rose said, is to control the, as much as we can, definitely appearance and location where possible. Mr. King?
That's right, Madam Mayor. And to be clear, this small cell franchise agreement is for exactly that, small cells. This is not for the large towers, such as the example that was stated out on Route 3, I believe, with the tree limbs attached to it. These are the small cells that are typically attached to existing wooden utility poles. And in most cases, most folks probably drive by them every day and may not even notice that they're there. They're basically a small top that's placed on top of an existing wooden utility pole. And then there's a box that's roughly the size of a large carry-on suitcase, basically, that's attached to the pole. And again, there are design standards for all of that. But these are small poles. The maximum by the guidelines are 55 feet outside of the historic district and 40 feet within the historic district. So again, these are not the tall monopole towers that you may have noticed sporadically around the area.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to think where they are, and I've seen pictures of them too, and I do drive by them and not notice them right now.
Madam Mayor, I move the ordinance in first read.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded.
Can I add something?
Yes, Councilor Duffy.
I want to thank staff and the work they've done in the last year to get us ready for this kind of proposal, especially the city attorney, everyone in the Public Works Department. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
This matter has been approved on first read. It will come back for second read, I presume, at the next meeting? All right, thank you. We now come to the time where we have comments from the public for folks who have signed up to speak before the meeting. To be fair to everyone, please observe the 5-minute time limit and yield the floor when the clerk of council indicates your time has expired. There's also a little thing with green and yellow and red lights there. We have 2 speakers signed up to speak tonight. The first is Harriet Rowe.
Harriet Rose, still on Brent Street. I went to the College Heights Civic Association meeting this past Sunday and heard some complaints about the amount of traffic that is now cutting through on Stafford and Rappahannock to get to Cowan Boulevard. And I wondered if maybe in the future we'll have to look for some solution to that. I'm one of those that goes down Augustine, turns left onto Stafford, gets down to the bus station and cuts over there to Cowan Boulevard. Because if not, then I have to go to College Heights, I have to go to Augustine, I have to make a U-E on Route 1 and then come up to Cowan Boulevard. So that's why people are beginning to cut through College Heights. They're also talking about some additional building going up where the mobile home park is now. And I hate to tell you, but when I left the city of Fredericksburg, city manager's office, I went to work in the governor's office. And we did some statistical booklets for all of the counties and all of the cities. And in those days, we're talking early 70s, mid 70s, Fredericksburg was described as being a McDonald's strip on Route 1. And they're talking about like putting in fast food in this new place for development. And I'd like to see some of that cut back. I really don't want Fredericksburg, because I hate to tell you, it hasn't changed that much. Drive along Route 1 from the bottom of the hill up to the top of the hill, and it still is McDonald's strip. And I don't like anybody describing Fredericksburg as that way. So I would like you all to give serious consideration as to what you allow to be built in there. I'm probably reading my shorthand better than I am my longhand. Oh, the data center that you all discussed in the work session. No, nothing set, but you were talking about the size of a data center, the architecture of a data center. And I think Mary Washington Hospital, University can be looked at as how to build something and make it blend in with the city. It's one of the prettiest parking decks I've ever seen, and it has the same architecture as the college, so it blends in. And I'd like to see anything that we do require the builders, and builders would tell you it's too expensive, what have you. Well, you know what? You've got to preserve our city. And I like the job you all are doing, and I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years with the city council. But council members in the past did not do City of Fredericksburg any favors in allowing some of the building they have allowed. And College Heights is disappearing. You all need to look at the outline of College Heights and drive all the way around the edge and see how commercialism is creeping into the residential area. And I think you really need to do something. You, as this city council, and the ones in the future, preserve that residential area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rome. Frank Whittick.
Mayor Greenlaw, members of council, my name's Frank Whittick. I live at 119 Caroline, and I have lived there for 26 years. My issue today is to speak to item number 7 on the council agenda, the Alms House. My wife and I have been driving around the states for the last 30 days, and I arrived back here on Sunday. And an individual of Tree Fredericksburg called me today about 2 hours ago and asked for me to come and save the trees with regard to the movement of the house. Unfortunately, I feel like the cart is in front of the horse because I know very little about the proposal and hope to hear that when item number 7 comes up. So my objection is maybe a little premature. I have no problems with the saving of the facility. I understand it's the second oldest facility that's outside the historic district. It is a historic facility. I served on the HFFI board for some time and am aware of the efforts the city has made and HFFI has made to preserve facilities, and I commend you with offering money. I understand you're going to offer money through HFFI to save the facility. My concerns would be, are we establishing precedents outside the historic district, and are the rules and regulations as to the amount of money that you would be dedicating toward this effort for a private enterprise? My primary concern, one that only I can have an issue with as Tree Fredericksburg, is that when you move the large facility, and I assume it's going to be 35 feet wide and 55 feet long if it's the whole thing, the whole house, then you're going to be doing some tearing up of the lovely trees that we have along Purcell Street. So whatever happens, bear in mind there's some aesthetic value to those trees. I can't detail what that would be at the current time, but we can calculate what that would be, and the effects of stripping all those trees along the street so the facility so the house can be moved down the street, all the way down, I presume, to the end of Purcell Street. So you have a decision to make, whether you want to spend the money to preserve the house and establish a precedence, or save some of the trees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Whittick. That concludes the speakers who have signed up to speak. Does any council, when we have now come to item 7A on our council agenda, does anyone wish to add to the council agenda? All right, then. I do. You want to make an addition?
Yes, the
Okay.
Unity Festival.
Unity Festival, that'll be item 7B. All righty. Well, Councilor Duffy, the Alms House.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank everyone, especially staff, for the preparation of the memo that they gave us today. We talked about some of these issues last meeting, and you can see that the climb is very substantial, and I understand that. We have Mr. Liddick here, who's here. Where is he? Could he stand up? There he is. Who's interested in the possibility of moving the home that dates from the 1870s. It's the second oldest building in College Heights, not in the city. But so it does have some history. It has some interesting history, being associated with a dean who lived in it at the college. It was formerly on the campus of the university when it first started out. It's been moved twice before, so that's why it's not eligible for tax credits. So there are real limitations, but I do want to emphasize that as a resident of College Heights and as a person who cares deeply about historic preservation of our neighborhoods and not just the oldest buildings downtown in our historic district, we hate to see something like this demolished. And along with folks in the College Heights Civic Association, we've talked with the Catholic Church about who are the new owners of the property, about ways that we might make use of that building. I am able to say that I did speak to the Diocese of Arlington, that they are flexible about the date for when they might want to start building their parking lot, which is, it's a valid resource too for the neighborhood, because they complain about, we have a concern about the parking that those institutions on College Avenue use. So what I'd like to do is say that I understand that this is a steep climb, and as you see in the project component costs, it is roughly $150,000. And if we could get word from Mr. Liddick, he might be able to tell us what it would take for him to be able to do this. And I dare say it might be even more than the $20,000 you're probably hard-pressed to approve. Could we hear from Mr. Liddick to talk to us about?
Certainly,
Thank you.
certainly.
And I do want to thank him for his time and effort to try to see what can be done here. It's been a long time we've been talking.
Yeah, I've been working on this project, and I just want to preface this conversation by the fact that I'm not really here with my hat in my hand. I'm trying to do something good here and make it work financially for everyone. Obviously, the biggest problem here, the house was moved twice before, but we didn't have the abundance of overhead lines we do now. And so just the house, when we move it, the house, if we'd move it, it would be at least 40 to 45 feet in the air, and none of the lines have enough slack to raise them up and go under it. So we've got some, I think, fairly decent pricing from Dominion and Cox to, basically Dominion has the luxury of rerouting their power and not disconnecting their clients, customers, while they remove the lines. They take the lines down, we come through, they put the lines back up. Cox, I think, has the same sort of strategy. Now, Verizon's a little bit different. They, wanted initially to put all the lines underground and charge $72,000 to do that. So someone with the city intervened and said, look, there's got to be a better way. And so, but still, rather than, and they told me, we are not willing to disconnect the lines. What we're willing to do is drop the lines to the ground if you protect them when you go over and put them back up, and we don't have to disconnect anybody that way, and we'll reduce the price to $38,000 for that. So again, it's a big number. And when, you know, they have, Dominion has 4 times as many lines, and Cox has almost as many, and both of them, those guys combined, were $34,000. So I'm not speaking to anybody's numbers, I'm just telling you what they are. So you got approximately 75,000 just to remove the lines. The house move is easy. Of course, you know, the tree issue is a different thing. There's some very ugly trees along Stafford Avenue. The one side of the limbs, they go up like that, and they've been trimmed out in the middle for years and years, and they're, Verizon can't get the, if that's the way they're gonna stick to, which they are, they're not willing to disconnect, which again would probably reduce their price again by half, just disconnect, let us come through like Dominion and Cox, but they're not. So they have to get their lines to the ground, and the trees on Stafford Avenue, one side of them, the only way to get their lines to the ground is remove one side or the other side of the tree so they can get them down through it. If you go up and look at it, they're huge trees, and they come up the middle, and the lines are right in the middle. And there's one tree, we're not talking about abundance of trees on Parcell Street. We're talking about one tree close to the corner of Stafford Avenue that has some overhanging branches. Not talking about removing a tree, we're talking about removing some overhanging branches, but you know, it is what it is. You can't get the house through without removing those. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, the numbers, I saw the proposal, you saw the numbers. I'm not sure where the number for the utility hookups came from, or I didn't get a number for the tree removal of 15,000. I'm assuming, I don't know where that came from. I had the 70,000 or so plus for the line removal, relocation, and 35,000 to 40,000 to move the house. So at that point, I'm at somewhere around $110,000. I guess the financial aspect of it is, you know, we don't mind. I mean, the house has value. You know, it's a 2,000 square foot house. You know, we could put a value on it of $20 a square foot, and that's generous. 25 would be more than generous, because we don't know what it's going to look like when it gets to the other end of the move. But let's say, you know, we go $40,000 to $50,000 for the value of the house. And, you know, for the potential intrinsic value, we could throw in another 15. So as builders and developers, we're willing to throw $65,000 at getting this house down to our lot, which is 2 blocks away. You know, we don't know that that's going to be a wonderful house to sell in College Heights. If we could drop it down on Caroline, Lower Caroline, it'd be an easy deal. And if we could get those tax credits, as Mr. Duffy spoke of, which we can't because it's been moved and it's not on the historic register, that would be an easy deal. I mean, 40% federal credits and 25% state, we're done, but they're not available. So, you know, we're willing to throw $65,000 at this deal, and we just need some help on the other end. The help could come in the form of water and sewer hookups, which I saw the proposal, it said 16,000 for that, but I don't know where that came from either. It seemed to me last time I paid for a water and sewer hookup seemed to be quite, that's probably about right, maybe 16, but to 15,000 for the tree removal. I think it could be done less for that because all we're doing is limbing some trees back. Anyway, we're still a long ways apart. Bottom line, we're willing to do what we can. We're interested. We think the project would be good. It'd be exciting. It'd be doing something good. We could preserve history here, and we're willing to do. I've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I'm willing to Believe me, stick building a home on those lots would be a lot easier than what we're going to undertake if we were willing to do this. We're just not willing to throw $100,000 at it because at that point, we're upside down before we even start. So, I mean, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Liddick.
Thank you, Mr. Liddick. Councilor Duffy?
You know, I don't know what to say. The farther we got into this, certainly the harder it seemed. So I don't come, you know, with great expectations. And I have talked to many of you already, knowing your reservations about making an investment like this for the for the house. You know, I'd love to hear some of your reactions and also the kinds of things that we might do in the future to prevent the demolition of a house like this.
If I may, I'd like to ask our staff, and I think it would be Ms. Swartz and Mr. King, you may have some questions for you as well, about the impact of moving. Mr. Liddick said something I hadn't heard, and incidentally, thank you, Mr. Liddick, for being willing to look at doing this. But something was said that I didn't quite understand. Is it my understanding that Cox and Dominion, because they can lower the lines, do not require the trees to be removed, but that the trees are being removed because Verizon is refusing to cooperate?
Correct. The proposals that have been received indicate that Verizon, their choice is simply to lay the lines on the ground, and that can't be done without the tree trimming. So the tree trimming is only for Verizon's proposal.
I want to add, though, that the limbs that are, the trees that are V-shaped, they have to be trimmed substantially.
Yes, yes.
Like half the tree has to go.
So
That's
trees, will
that's the
trees be
difficulty.
removed, and how many, and what is the extent of this?
I may defer to Mr. King on this one.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to admit, I'm not completely familiar with how the house is being moved, and not completely familiar with how the utility lines will be disconnected and lowered. It was my assumption that when the house is moved down Parcell Street, that it is such large size that as it goes down the street, that the trees that are on either side of the street would have to be pruned in order to get this house down the street.
Regardless of the lines.
Regardless of the lines.
Regardless of the lines, there's either pruning or removal of trees?
That's my understanding. Now, if Mr. Liddick or someone else has another idea on how the house is moved down the street that doesn't impact the trees, that was my understanding, that in order to get the house down the street, that the trees on both sides had to be pruned back, and at least a couple fairly substantially. Mr. Liddick mentioned there's a fairly large tree, I believe it's a green ash tree at the corner of Stafford Avenue and
Is
Parcell Street.
that in the public right-of-way or privately owned?
That could possibly be a privately owned tree. It is behind the sidewalk, and it's far enough behind the sidewalk that the tree itself may be a private tree, although it does have a limb that encroaches out over the sidewalk and out over into the street. And that limb is pretty substantial and would most likely, in my opinion, have to be removed in order to facilitate the house clearance down the street.
You're pretty much going to destroy the tree.
It's a very significant size tree, yes.
Yeah. Ms. Swartz, did you want to add to that or not?
Just wanted to add that I think there's sort of two different, there's the regular tree trimming that has to occur to get the house through, and then there's some additional removal to deal with the Verizon line specifically. So I think there's sort of two options here. In terms of how the house is moved, there's a little bit of a description in the staff report about how it is lifted and placed on jacks and then on a trailer, and so it's moved in that way. From conversation with Mr. Liddick, they have looked into disassembling the house in part or totally, and that's even more expensive to do.
Sure. Exactly. Councilor Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I think it's imperative that as a council, we express our sincere thanks to Dr. Duffy for all the efforts he has put into every effort and every thought in saving that house. And I would want to say personally that I truly appreciate all the time and effort that you have put into this project. I know there are concerns about trees, there are concerns about historic tax credits, how much of this is really historical, and that's, I will leave to my colleagues to discuss some of that. But I did want to comment on one of the statements that was made about setting a precedent, which seemed to be like a worrisome question. You're going to be setting a precedent about preservation outside the historic district. To that point, I want to say I am looking forward to setting a precedent for historic preservation, whether it's in the historic district or outside the historic district. For years, we have basically put away hundreds of thousands of dollars for restaurants, for bars, and for any other types of commercial development, yet we have spent very, very little on issues of preservation of our historic character of this city. Bars and breweries and businesses come and go, and that will continue to happen for the life of the city. When we start losing historic assets, they are gone forever, and the character of this city is changed forever. The one thing that Fredericksburg has is that character, which is why everybody sitting in here lives here. As part of that is the historic charm of this city. We lose that, and we're not a city anymore. We're just another stop on 95, and we will lose economic development. We will lose other opportunities if we lose what makes us a unique community. So to the question of setting a precedent, it may not be this one, and I'll listen to what my colleagues have to say, but I am truly looking forward to us starting to actually saying, yes, preservation of this community is worth investing in. And thank you, Dr. Duffy, for all your efforts in this matter. And I will, in this particular case, will follow your lead in whichever way you want to proceed.
Thank you. As I said before, I think this is a tough road because the gap for funding is so big, and I think as we realize more, the impact of moving it is so disruptive to the neighborhood. Again, I am heartened by the work of staff in this whole project. I'm heartened by what Ms. Schwartz said at our neighborhood meeting the other day about finding ways to protect neighborhoods beyond just a strict or restrictive historic district. There are things that we can do to protect against demolition of buildings and things if neighborhoods agree that this is something that they'd like to do. And I think that would be interesting in College Heights because it does have a kind of character that many of the neighborhoods don't have. So I hesitate to push too hard on this because I do understand. I've talked to you guys and I know it's a hard push for you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I do think it was a worthy exercise, as Mr. Kelly mentioned, to put this emphasis on historic preservation, not just in the historic district, but preservation of our communities everywhere. And I, again, want to say I'm very appreciative of the work of staff and Mr. Liddick. I do regret that it doesn't look like this will work unless somebody tells me otherwise. But again, I thank you for your time.
Councilor Fry.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. And I'll do this. I'll echo what Mr. Kelly said. We usually go back and forth sometimes, but I'll echo what Mr. Kelly said. Thank you, Dr. Duffy, for all your work. And I just want to throw this out there. For one, I would say to you, Dr. Duffy, don't call it quits tonight. Maybe it needs to sink in. I don't know. That's just me talking. But one thing that I've noticed, and it's my opinion, and I'm just going to throw it out there. We have ward representatives, and we have at-large, and we have Mayor Greenlaw. And a lot of times when things go on in particular wards, you have people who were chosen to guide that ward, and when those particular, you don't know what the issue is going to be. We don't know when the phone rings, we don't know what's on the other line, pretty much, or the email comes. So, with all due respect, when things happen in somebody else's ward, I just feel as a representative myself that was also elected to represent, to follow that man's lead, because he knows what's going on in that particular ward, you know, and everybody knows I've thrown fits a million times about Ward 4, about what goes on in Ward 4. It's hard if you don't know and if you don't see it. So, you know, just out of respect for the fellow councilman, Dr. Duffy, for the work that has been put in, you know, I'm at least willing to let it sink in, but it's not my call. Just saying that publicly, but it's not my call, period. But there's a lot of work because in the same sense, the city threw the option up there. I know it kind of went away, it faded away and the deadline was up, but the city itself, us, we're the ones who said, hey, is there something we can do to save it? So, you know, so Dr. Duffy's taking his time now to try to see whatever he can do. So I'm just, whatever you want to do, Dr. Duffy, but it puts folks in a hard spot because if we didn't offer it, or hey, can somebody get this house? If we never did that, we would never had this discussion. When we approved the parking lot, we wouldn't be having this conversation tonight. It would be torn down, but we threw the option out there. So I think listening to this, and I'm part of the council, I think we should have had I don't know, maybe a more definite what we would do. You know, when it came to this point of somebody saying, hey, I like to get this piece of property, I like to get this house. So maybe we can learn from this, but like I said, it's not my call. I'm just supportive of what's going on. I heard Mr. Withers talk about parking sometimes, and I can't speak to, I can hear Mr. Withers, but I can't speak to what he sees on the parking issue. So, you know, but I have to respect what you say. So,
Thank you.
all right, but that's all I have.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Withers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also like to thank Dr. Duffy and Mr. Liddick for his participation. Am I wrong, Mr. Liddick? It sounds like to me that you're saying it would be difficult to do this project with the numbers that we're seeing tonight. Is that correct or incorrect? Yes, the $148,291 that you would have to.
Saying that the numbers I had was a little closer to probably 110, 115. I think Kate added the water and sewer, which we were going to have to do anyway, which I thought may have been a concession. Yeah. If the city wanted to go forward with this, could make it's kind of a contribution towards the effort. I mean, you know, we're probably, you know, the tree trimming, I don't think it's going to be $15,000. I mean, we're not talking about a 40-foot wide house. We're talking about a 23-foot wide house. There's one tree, as pointed out by Mr. King, that's at the corner of Stafford, kind of close to the corner of Stafford and Parcel, and branches overhang. I mean, it's 23-foot wide house. We could move. I mean, not every tree on Parcel Street has to come down like, you know, some people suggest. Yeah. One tree has to be trimmed back so we can just get by it. Yeah. The main thing is the overhead lines. That's just $75,000 right there. Tree trimming, I think I could get that done for a fraction of $15,000. And of course, the water and sewer was never considered into our numbers because we're going to pay for that anyway, whether we build a house or do a historical restoration.
That's true.
You know, the unknown is what the historical restoration is going to be.
That was my next question.
So, yeah, but, you know, I'm thinking closer to 110, 115 total move, of which we're willing to throw 65 or maybe a tad more or less. But, I mean, we're still a long ways away.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been up there 3 times, twice today and once, I guess Sunday and Monday. I am concerned about the streetscape. One block seems like it's not going to be affected too much. A couple of blocks is going to be, I think it's going to be pretty severe. I don't know, it looks like a walnut tree or pecan tree or something, a large tree on the corner of Stafford Avenue and Parcel. My main concern about that is a private tree. It's got a branch that's going to have to cut off of probably 12 to 18 inches. And it's a lot of weight there. And the rest of that tree is on that lot leaning towards the house, the homeowner's house. That's pretty severe a deal. When you cut off that much weight off of one side of a tree, you're really probably going to, I don't know whether you're going to kill it or not, but I think the streetscape is going to change there, and that's a big deal for me. As much as I appreciate you doing this, it's going to be hard for me to support it based on that and a few other factors. But like I say, I was up there twice today. I keep riding back and forth trying to see if I can make it work in my mind. And it just seems to me it's going to be so disruptive to 2 blocks of Parcell Street. It's going to take a long time to recover that. So it's going to be difficult for me to support that. So, but thank you for your work, and you may have enough support for it. I have to be careful with Mr. Liddick. I eat down to his establishment a lot. I love his place too. He might slip something in my food when I vote against this. But anyway, thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, Councilor Carey. Divine, Councilor Divine. Oh, my. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also wanted to publicly thank Dr. Duffy and Mr. Liddick, staff, and also the Catholic Diocese for giving us a little extra time to consider this proposal. And I know we're all very excited about the possibility of saving this house. For me, I'm having trouble with kind of saving the integrity of the house, which I think has already been compromised, and saving the integrity of the neighborhood. And I think that's where I'm struggling, is that I do think the neighborhood will be impacted. I've driven the route that the house will be moved on, and I'm very familiar with the neighborhood. I lived in that neighborhood for about 30 years. So, and I agree that unfortunately the trees there, over the years have not been trimmed in a very aesthetically pleasing way, but I think doing further damage to them is not going to be beneficial to the neighborhood. And I guess, if the home were able maybe to be showcased somewhere different, I don't know. I just feel like there's going to be a huge impact on the neighborhood, and for a location that maybe doesn't showcase the house in the best possible way at the end of it. So I just feel like overall, I think the effort has been there to try to make this work, but I'm just not sure it works for me. So thank you.
Well, I think you said it well, Councilor Devine, that the integrity of the home is already compromised, and it is a difficult decision here, but I'm very, very sympathetic with maintaining the history all over our town. Our neighborhoods are priceless, and they each have their own character, and I've said this many, many times. But the truth of the matter is, with this particular building, it doesn't qualify for historic preservation grants or tax credits because its integrity has been that much compromised. It's been moved several times, it's been added onto, so it's been significantly altered. So to my way of thinking, the history is lost as far as that building is concerned. And the cost, Mr. Liddick, you are so kind to want to do this, but your costs are mounting, and the cost to the neighborhood may very well not be worth it as well. I agree with Councilor Devine that I worry about the integrity of the neighborhood. I mean, it takes 20 to 25 years to replace a tree canopy. And if you wipe it out down the street, it makes a significant difference. But so I'm not going to support this proposal. I do appreciate the amount of effort that's gone into it, both on by Mr. Liddick, by Councilor Duffy, and the very good research that's been done by our staff. But I like I said, as far as I'm concerned here, so much of the history is already lost. If it, the proof of the pudding for me is that it doesn't qualify for historic preservation grants.
Mayor, I might add that I do want to also thank the staff at University of Mary Washington, Michael Spencer,
Oh, yes.
who with his students has cataloged the building and, made tremendous records. I think given where we are, it's probably appropriate for Mr. Liddick to finally move along in his pursuit of a traditionally built house, because I'm concerned about the landscape of the neighborhood too, and but I think these are some of the kind of tough decisions and innovative solutions we'll have to come up with to make sure that these kinds of things don't happen, or at least are limited moving forward. I'm receiving more credit here, or thanks, than I deserve, but I do want to thank everybody for considering this. This is all that I ever wanted, was to see if there was a way to deal with this in an appropriate way. And I want to thank the diocese for working with us. And but I think it's appropriate that this doesn't drag on longer. I think that's where we are.
Thank you.
I don't think it requires a vote.
It does not. It is not a matter for action. So if council concurs, we will end on that note. All right. Well, again, thank you, Mr. Liddick, and we appreciate the amount of work that has gone into this. Council consent agenda
Now,
is...
let me indulge you one more minute.
Certainly.
on the
Oh,
Unity Festival.
we have 7B.
Yes.
We have 7B Unity Day. Thank you, Counselor.
The Unity Festival
Duffy.
is on June 23rd, and it's going to be on the campus of what we used to call Original Walker Grant, over by the new Walker Grant Center. And, we have so many things today that divide us, make us worried about the future. We have an establishment in a town that's kind of gained a reputation for, we have those kinds of things. Here is a chance that's kind of sparked by the Boys and Girls Club to bring everyone together and to get to know each other better, to learn about our neighbors. We're calling it the Unity Festival, and it's going to be a combined teen summit that will occur in the morning, and a festival in the afternoon that will include performances and vendors and just a very family-friendly get-together. I just want to encourage everybody to stop by if they can and get involved. As I said, we are part of the American experiment that we actually can live in a diverse society together in a way that mankind had struggled to before. And I think this city represents the best of what that means. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to showcase this. So I do urge everybody to come down and see this inaugural Unity Festival, which we hope will be an annual event.
On
June 23rd.
June 23rd. Okay, just wanted to repeat that date.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it myself. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Move consent agenda as submitted.
Please
Second.
cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
We have before us 5 sets of minutes: the work session of February 27th, the work session of March 1st, the work session of March 13th, the public hearing of May 8th, and the regular session of May 8th. Are there any additions or corrections?
Move the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
On boards and commissions, we have before us the reappointment to the Rappahannock Area Community Services Board of Karen Calais.
Move approval of Karen Calais to the Rappahannock Area Community Services Board.
Second.
Please cast your votes. And thank you, Ms. Calais, for your service.
Motion passes 7-0.
Item 10B is an appointment to the Economic Development Authority. We have two openings. Mitzi Brown has completed a term that she finished for someone else and is eligible for a term and for reappointment. And we have three other applicants. Madam Clerk, would you poll the council?
Yes, I'm going to call each of you, and you let me know your two selections. Counselor Devine,
Sorry, Mitzi Brown and Henry Hap Connors.
Counselor Kelly,
Ms. Brown and Hap Connors.
Dr. Duffy,
I want to emphasize that we have an embarrassment of riches again, and all the people who applied.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Brown and Mr. Connors.
Counselor Fry,
Ms. Brown and Mr. Connors.
Vice Mayor Withers,
Ms. Brown and Mr. Connors.
Counselor Ellis,
Hap Connors and Stacy Horn.
and Mayor Greenlaw.
Ms. Brown and Hap Connors.
Okay, I have that. The majority has selected Brown and Connors.
Thank you. As Councilor Duffy said, we do have an embarrassment of riches. We have wonderful opportunities here, and I hope that those who have been willing to apply to the EDA will continue to be interested in applying for other commissions. We are so grateful to our volunteer commissioners who serve in very demanding and important positions. City Manager's Agenda, item 11A, is a second read on Ordinance 18-08, rezoning the Hilton Tract. Mr. Craig?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an item rezoning 90.06 acres from R2 residential and commercial highway to planned development medical center with proper conditions. The intent of the rezoning is to create a new medical campus centered on a VA medical clinic, approximately 400,000 square feet, with associated spin-off commercial and office uses. The rezoning was before you all at your first meeting in May for a first read. After the public hearing, it was voted upon for approval for first read, so this is the second read this evening. There has been one change to the proposal. Proffer number 3B, in response to some discussion before the council, the applicant has proffered to exclude religious institutions except chapels within healthcare facilities utilized as an accessory use, colleges or universities, and elementary and middle schools, notwithstanding that any of those uses may be permitted as long as they retain a taxable status. So that's the one change to the application. Mr. Freeling has some additional information to discuss, and then we'll take any questions yet.
Thanks, Mike. Not a lot to add. Mr. Kelly asked a question at the last meeting about the number of jobs. We went to Renaissance Planning Group, which did the financial analysis for us. And based on comparable facilities, they anticipate between 1,000 and 1,300 jobs based on whether it's 400,000 square feet or 500,000 square feet for the VA clinic alone. I've attempted to get more of a breakdown of what types of jobs from a comparable, the largest VA outpatient clinic down in Charlotte. I've contacted the administrator and have not received a response yet. It's in the works, so I will provide that information as I get it. Certainly there'll be doctors and nurses and service and et cetera, but I don't have an exact breakdown, but I will provide that.
Thank you.
Nothing else to add.
Any further questions, Councilor Fry?
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. Just wanted to ask a question, just for public record. What happens to this property if this project does not happen? I mean, with the zoning part, and how does that work? Just, I received some calls on that.
Mr. Fry, there's been a lot of thought put into that, and let me go through a couple of proper. So, the rezoning is to Planned Development Medical Center. Whether or not the VA Medical Center picks this property, that zoning stays in place. Several of the proffers that the applicant has made were made to address what happens in the instance that the medical center doesn't pick this. I think first and foremost, there is a required 35% land use mix that would require office or medical center use, and that's intended to ensure that there's a significant amount of the land that's dedicated to the workplace, that it will be an employment center. That's the first big one. There's prohibition on uses. There are only 72 residential uses permitted, and they've got to be vertically mixed use. So it can't just flip into a housing development. Warehouses and heliports are excluded. I think the other real important proffer that I'll highlight is the level of master planning. So we've got a general development plan that's fairly general. The applicant has proffered 2 levels of master planning. If the VA medical clinic does not pick the site, then those master plans, both the overall, the 2 levels of master planning are that the infrastructure will be planned holistically across the entire site so that it's cohesive. At the second level is the individual land bays will be master planned for building location, landscaping, parking arrangement, and that kind of stuff. Both of those will go, well, let me make sure I read that correctly. The land bay element will go before the planning commission for an advisory review. So those are the protections that have been put in place in case the VA medical clinic doesn't pick the site. There's going to remain that core of use, and there will be some additional planning.
And thank you. And also to be clear, for future purposes, it's the council that can change this zoning again, right? If we want to change the zoning in the future.
Yes, the council is the body that changes the zoning. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Because I had some good questions, some good feedback since the last meeting, and one was I'll give you an example of like the Slavery Museum site and so on and so forth, and you know it's limited use, and you have to go through hoops and barriers, you know, to change things. So, and I'm getting that back from the residents. So I'm glad that they reached out to me, and you know, it makes a lot of sense. But I just want to have it on public record.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Craig? This item is before us for a second read.
Madam Mayor, I move for approval on second read with the changed proffers with the revised proffers.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Item 11B is a first read item approving the fiscal year budget amendment appropriating funds in the CSA, the Children's Services Act Fund. Ms. Jett?
Hello.
And we appreciate having our folks here.
Yes, let me take a minute to introduce
Uh-huh.
the people that are here. We have Kristen Gallick, who is the Director of Department of Social Services. Representing CSA are Gail Geese and Jamie Divelbus. And Beth Jerome is going to talk about, if you have questions about foster care, she's the Assistant Director of Social Services. So today before you is an agenda item asking to approve a budget amendment increasing the appropriation in the Children's Services Act and the Social Services Fund, which is the Department of Social Services, as well as approving the use of contingency in the general fund for the CSA program. Let me give you a little bit of background about the Children's Services Act. The Fredericksburg Children's Services Act program oversees a collaborative system of services and funding that is child-centered, family-focused, and community-based that addresses the strengths and needs of troubled and at-risk youth and their families in the city. It ensures that services and funding are consistent with the Commonwealth's policies of preserving families and providing appropriate services in the least restrictive environment while protecting the welfare of children and maintaining the safety of the public. The program provides agency collaboration through the Community Policy Management Team and the Family Assessment Planning Team, which oversees access to the programs and manages the funding of these services. So the item before you is an increase of $529,217. The adopted budget for CSA was $1.9 million in FY18. The CSA program has served, while serving the same number of children, 73 this year, the children require greater services through the special education day, private day school. Let me give you a little bit of background about the SPED program. Some children, for a variety of reasons, are not able to be educated in the public school setting. When public school education is not possible, access to the special education, or SPED schooling, provides these children with less restrictive option to day or residential treatment centers. Private day placements offer smaller classes as a therapeutic component during the school day, addressing the child's needs as a whole. Children in need of SPED placement generally have emotional and/or learning disabilities and other severe health impairments as documented in their individual education plan. EIPs are part of the federally mandated Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It is through this act that children with disabilities have the opportunity to receive both a public education and intervention services specifically related to their disability. The intent of the IDEA matches with CSA's philosophy of keeping children in the least restrictive environment. However, SPED placements are costly and constitute a rising portion of the total expenditures under the CSA Act, both locally and statewide. So CSA, for the $529,217,000 increase in appropriation they're asking for, a portion of that will be provided by state and federal funds. They anticipate getting $341,873 in federal and state grants. The remaining portion will be provided from the city. That includes a transfer of $90,000 from the general fund. This will be from contingency. A transfer of $87,344 of fund balance from the Social Services Fund, and the use of $10,000 in fund balance for the CSA fund. I'd like to talk about the increase for social services. We're asking for an increase in appropriation of $187,344. As I just discussed, $87,344 of this is going to be transferred to CSA. The remaining $100,000 is for the cost of children in the 4E foster care program. The city currently has 26 children in this category of foster care. This is an increase of 14 from the FY18 budget that was submitted last fall. And this increase will be funded completely by state and federal sources. Just to briefly highlight the fiscal impacts. Again, this $90,000 will come from the general fund contingency. That will reduce the balance in contingency to $224,820. The DSA appropriation will reduce their fund balance we estimate at year end in FY18, the fund balance will be $366,000. And again, we use $10,000 in fund balance from CSA, and we estimate that that will reduce their fund balance to approximately $200,000. I'd like to take any questions you have, and ones that I can't answer, we have people here that can.
All right. Vice Mayor Withers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You might need some help on some of these.
I'm sure I will.
First, with the Children's Service Act, obviously I'm going to support this to take care of these children, but do we have a reason for high, we got the same number of children at 73, but more children that are requiring special education and private daycare? Do we know what that spike is about?
Good evening. Across the state, we have seen a huge rise in private day placements for the special ed children. A lot of this has been contributed to a rise in autism. And so those placements are even more costly than the regular private day placements.
What, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are these longtime residents of Fredericksburg, or are they people that have just moved here and come into Fredericksburg and now need to have special education?
I think that's, having sat on the board now for almost 2 years, I think it's a combination of both, because we do have children or students that transfer in that we kind of, I've always called inherit. It goes through the IEP process, and once the IEP team has determined that a private day placement's appropriate, it's written into the IEP and then it comes to FAPT. And we've had students that have transferred out as well.
Okay. So you feel, okay, so you feel like it's a level playing field for us? I mean, you know, I'm all in on taking care of children in the city. I struggle sometimes with taxpayers having to pay for folks that might just move into the city and have temporary residence or for whatever reason, and you know, we have to go down that road. Same thing, I guess, with foster care. It appears that we only had 12 foster care children at the beginning of fiscal year 2018, and now we got 26, which is over 100% increase. Any reason for that kind of spike in less than a year?
Well, and I will say, going back to the special ed, I will tell you that there's probably not a locality in the state that does not struggle with their private day placements, the increases. It's being reviewed in localities, even regionally, to see what can be done to decrease those costs. At the state CSA conference, this was also addressed of what can we do with these increasing the increasing in cost for private day placements.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to let that go with that. But I hope we try to look out for not only these children, but for the taxpayers in the city who have to foot the bills. Obviously, we all want to take care of children with special needs. I'm not here to balk on that. I sometimes feel like that lots of people, especially with social services needs, come from the region to the city because it's a hub, and the city has to pay that bill, and sometimes that's a little tough for me. Again, it's a double-edged sword. Obviously, I want to help people in need. I'm just that way. But at the same time, I like to make sure that we're doing the best we can for the taxpayers too, to make sure that, you know, I think a lot of things should be regional in the way we do it. So anyway, thank you for the explanation. I am going to support this.
Yeah. Well, as was mentioned, I sit on the CMPT board representing the council there, and it's actually, there have been regional meetings trying to discuss how we could accomplish, you know, a good way to take care of these children regionally in some way that we can combine forces. But it's a statewide problem. It's truly a statewide problem. Representative Thomas actually attempted to get a bill through that would help, and it got it through committee, but it got killed. So we keep working at chipping away at this. Now, you did ask the question about the increase in foster care. Beth, did you want to speak to that?
I was just going to mention, because I'm not sure where that figure came from. We have seen an increase certainly in the last year, and I just want to say that I think we can attribute some of that to our opioid epidemic that's happening. And we've seen a lot of cases that have had that issue, and the parents obviously have to seek treatment. And then at the time for the children is in care increases, and we end up trying to find permanency for them when a return home goal is not something that we can succeed with. So I was looking at the numbers that I have, and we currently, right now, today, we have 39 children in care in the city. but I'm not sure where the number 12 came from, unless that was just a 4E number that were funded through $40.
Well,
But
I just,
It probably is just the 4E.
because
So-
we typically have approximately about 40 children in care on any given day, but we did at one point see a huge increase from one year to the next, and we have had several large sibling groups that came into care. So that was, that will make their numbers go up rather quickly, but I think that when we look at it overall, as we grow, we're going to continue to see this, but we have seen kids that do also transfer out to other localities in terms of talking about for the special ed. So I do think that it's kind of a give and take on that end.
Right.
thank you
These
all.
are probably families that are more transient anyway. They're
That's
going to move
true.
from county to city and city back to county or off somewhere. Yeah.
That's true. That's
Uh-huh.
true. I hope
Thank-
that answered some, I'm not sure if I clarified it.
Thank you all for your service.
Sure.
Councilor Duffy?
Mayor, thank you. I do want to applaud the work of our Social Services Department. They do a great job. And I also want to emphasize that, of course, this is a national problem. And working in the schools, I can tell you that it is amazing what our schools can do for children with disabilities and with struggles that, doesn't require them to go to private care. So it is amazing, and I would certainly invite council to come with me to see, what our schools accomplish in terms of meeting the needs of students who have lots of needs. So, I'll support this too. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a general question, a little bit, just building on what Mr. Withers had asked, and this would be a question for the staff. Are we looking at this as these increases as a trend that we should be expecting to see for a period of time? Do we have any indication, or can you speak to that? So we can, when we keep going in the next few years, we can start hopefully not coming back and.
Well, as someone that also supervises the Jamie in the CSA, I think that we can. I don't think that we have seen until we have legislation that can possibly change that for us. I really don't see that we're gonna. Once something's in an IEP, we typically at the CSA level just take that information and are therefore mandated in order to pay. It's really not something that we have a lot of influence on or can change. So I don't see it decreasing, and I see the needs of the children that we have coming into care increasing. So that means that we have to put more services in place, and in order to try to serve them within our community, sometimes that's costly, but it's never as costly as we see residential can be. So in terms of costs, I really don't see a trend anytime soon where we're going to have anything leveling off, unfortunately. But hopefully we are going to be moving in an area where we can have some leverage on those that provide the services for us, so that we can have more negotiating skills in order to have caps and a better outlook on control for what they offer, and still not compromise those services that we need to get the kids what they need for their educational piece, at least.
I can tell you that our CMTP, these folks are, I always get the initials mixed. I hate initials,
There's too
whatever
many
it is.
acronyms, right?
Yeah, but the point is that I can tell you that they're working very hard. Part of it is what is mandated and what they're not allowed to do, so that we're working with the legislature to try to improve that. But by the same time, they're trying to, as Beth said, put leverage on these providers for more accountability and to better be able to negotiate. I mean, just plain negotiate price.
Right.
I mean, we're not trying to, and we want to give the very best possible care, but we also need to be able to have some level of
And just
of
as
competition.
you have said, right? I'm sorry, Mary.
Yeah, that's all right.
And just as you have recognized tonight, I mean, we all want to help give services to the children. We're not trying to say that that's not something that we want to skimp on, but we also feel like there's got to be something that we can try to implement and really do. And we're looking at that regionally because it gives us more leverage, because as the city, we're so much smaller, our numbers are smaller, so we're trying to look at our neighbors and really work in a force that will have more impact and be able to have a little bit more, I guess really leverage is the best word, with the numbers for these service providers so that we can say, we can guarantee you X number of kids if you all can give us a better rate. And just
Exactly.
really kind of be able to just not compromise the service, but really just hopefully get us a better deal.
Exactly. Well, thank you. It's a very, very difficult job that you do, and it's sad to know that we have more and more children that are sicker and sicker. Councilor Fry.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. And this is not directed to you. I just want you to know that, but I have to say this. The statement about opioids, I'm going to touch base on that real quick in a second. For me, some of the saddest stuff to hear is, and this is a little off subject, then I'm going to come back to subject. 20 years ago, before opioids and all of that, it was a crack epidemic, and it wasn't much attention put on it, and it was, what the end result was 3 strikes. And it wasn't treatment for folks that were on drugs. It was 3 strikes and life sentences pretty much, for that situation. So 20 years fast forward is an epidemic, which is true. It's really true. I mean, yeah, I know personal stories, about things. But one thing that I think that we're missing the mark on as a city, and I'm glad you brought that up, so that's where I'm coming back to. I approached this issue a while ago as well. We don't have like a DARE program or anything like that. And unless somebody wants to come to this council meeting and correct me, we don't have these programs. And I think in the future that, we need folks like you to help push the fact that, everybody knows that a lot of things are happening in repeated cycles and so on and so forth. But if we don't have any prevention or more prevention methods in place, so I would definitely love to see you guys come back or somebody else coming back saying they need support for drug prevention or so on and so forth, which are the real issues. We're talking numbers tonight, but the real issues are what's happening at these houses, why these kids, why you guys have to help. And those are the real issues that a lot of people don't see. So I would love in the future somehow to look out there and see you guys pushing somebody saying, hey, we need support on this. Because we always talk about what's going on after the fact, or we're always talking about the drugs they have, to settle your high for the night. But what are we doing preventing anything? I don't hear much conversation on that. So I'm glad you brought that up. And like I said, the difference of what was going on 20 years ago, it was prison. So now it's an epidemic, and we have to address it properly. And if I'm sitting here, and if it's a vote for funding or whatever the case, I'll be happy to tell the taxpayers this is why I voted this way, to support these type of issues. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Councilor Duffy.
Thank you. I would like to go ahead and move resolution first read approving a fiscal year 2018 budget amendment appropriating funds in the Children's Services Act Fund, the Social Services Fund, and the use of contingency in the general fund.
Second.
All right. Councilor Devine, did you want to say something, or were you going to make the motion?
That's okay. I'll just make a quick comment, and really it's just echoing what some people have said as far as, these are the most vulnerable people in our community, and through no fault of their own, many of them, have needs that we do need to meet as a community, and it's very difficult. It's certainly a costly option. Well, it's not even an option. It's a costly outcome for the city, but it's more costly to not help these kids reach their potential and, become productive members of, the society at large. So I also just want to thank you all for your passion and your care for, these folks in our society, these children. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to suspend the rules and have a second read tonight.
Sure.
So I make a motion that we amend the rules.
Second.
All right. Motion's been made to suspend the rules. Please cast your votes.
I didn't do it.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right.
Make a motion to pass on second read.
All right. Motion's been made to pass on second read. Motion's been seconded. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, Ms. Jepp, that's
Save
done?
paper next time.
Thank you. I'm going to stay here for the next item.
All righty. Well, for the next item is our first read on a budget amendment appropriating funds in school capital funds. Councilor Duffy, do you have a declaration to make?
Yes, I'd like to make a disclosure that I am assistant principal at Walker Grant Middle School, and I am able to participate in this transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Thank you. Councilor Fry?
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. Also read my disclosure. My spouse is an employee of the Fredericksburg Public School System, and I'm able to participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Thank you. Ms. Jett?
Thank you. This next item is regarding an appropriation in the school's capital funds in order to cash fund 2 projects that were identified for bond funding. This resolution also requires 2 readings, and the second reading is scheduled for June 12th. I'd like to give you a little bit of background. In the FY 2018 capital improvement plan, there was the replacement of the Walker Grant Elementary School, the roof at the Walker Grant Elementary School, and the first of 4 phases for the replacement of the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning units at Hugh Mercer Elementary School. The adopted budget included an appropriation of $1.3 million for the roofs, with the source of funds identified as debt. This project was included in the school bond-funded capital fund. The FY 2018 adopted budget also appropriated $100,000 in the school capital fund for HVAC replacement, with the source of funds being identified as a general fund transfer. The actual cost of the roof came in significantly under the $1.3 million estimate, or $293,321. Since the roof repairs were significantly under the original estimate, the schools asked if the HVAC project could be completed in 1 year instead of phased over 4. The project would now be funded with debt. The city agreed with this plan, and the cost of replacing all 4 units was $418,941. During the FY19 budget process, staff was asked to identify potential savings in the general fund to address certain city council priorities. Staff recommended cash funding the 2018 school projects, which eliminated the need to include debt service payments on these projects in the FY 2019 budget, as well as future budgets. Cash funding the projects will require the use of $443,049 of general fund balance, and this balance is committed for school capital projects. So I have included in your agenda packet a breakdown of that. The cost of the HVAC was $419,000. The FY18 appropriation was $100,000. We're using some other sources within that fund in the amount of approximately $120,000, requiring a general fund transfer of $200,000. In the school capital fund, again, we're using some, in the school bond funded capital projects fund, we're again using some resources that are available within that fund. So out of the $293,321 required, a balance of $243,049 from the general fund will be required. As a result of cash funding these projects, the city's borrowing cost for FY19 decreased by approximately $32,000, which represented a half year's debt service payment related to these projects. I'm now happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councilor Devine?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Judd, I'm just curious, I don't know if you have the answer to this, but the roof project was originally estimated at $1.3 million.
That's correct.
Okay.
The roof project first appeared in the CIP in FY 2012, and that original estimate was $1.2 million. So that amount in the 2012 CIP was scheduled for replacement in FY 2015. So that amount and project carried forward until 2018.
Okay, so we had basically a placeholder, 1.2 million.
Yes, we did.
And it came in at 293,000.
That is
So it's
correct.
an overestimation of $1 million? Is there any explanation as to why it was such a costly project or an overestimation?
I cannot give you that answer now, but next week I will try to include an answer in the packet, if there is one to be had.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's called a swag, not an estimate.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Jett?
I'll ask, yes.
Maybe we could not have a second.
This is a first read item. What's the will of the council? We do need a vote.
I move we approve on first read.
We need a second.
Second.
Thank you. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Robinson will give us our quarter-end financial reports and tell us how we're going to pay for all this.
Madam Mayor, members of council, it is a pleasure to come before you, present the financial results for the third quarter of the fiscal year 2018. And for purposes of comparability, the results of the first 3 quarters of fiscal years 2015 through 2017 have also been included. Focusing on the general fund, we note that the current amended budget amount for the general fund is $94.4 million. In the first 3 quarters of fiscal year 2018, actual revenue in the general fund increased by 3.7% over the same 9-month period in the fiscal year 2017. In contrast, the fiscal year 2018 actual revenue fund expenditures increased only 0.7% when compared to the comparable period in 2017. Management anticipates that the real estate tax, sales tax, meals tax, and other budgeted revenue sources will create a combined revenue source necessary to balance the fiscal year 2018 expenditures. Looking closer at the revenue picture, we note that the budgeted single largest general fund revenue comes from the real estate tax collections. In fiscal year 2018, we anticipate receiving 32.8% of the approximate $31 million from the general real estate tax collections. The completion of the first 3 quarters of 2018, we've experienced a 5.3% favorable growth in real estate tax collections compared to the comparable period in 2017. Sales tax revenue, the second largest revenue source of the general, of the general fund revenue, grew slightly more than 0.4% with the cumulative collections through March 31st, 2018, totaling nearly $6.7 million. Budgeted sales tax revenue amount is $13.1 million. However, it is important to note that the sales tax receipts have a 2-month delay in revenue posting, so that the $6.67 million in sales tax revenue was produced by recorded sales activity ending in December 31st, 2018. The sales activity recorded by the vendor in January, the sales activity is then recorded by the vendor in January and is forwarded to the Department of Taxation in February. In turn, the State Department of Taxation then forwards the city our appropriate share of sales tax revenue in March. They're accounting for it, it's a 2-month delay. Meals tax revenue, the third largest revenue source, grew 6.04%, reflecting approximately an $8.67 million income. The remaining 6 categories of revenue, which we track closely, are located on page 4 of the report that you have in your packet. We're pleased to report that the 11 revenue sources, which we have all experienced some degree in increase in relative growth in the 2018 year in comparison to the 2017 year. On pages 4 and 5 in your report, you'll also features a heading titled Update through May 2015 on key revenue developments. It's a pleasure to report that the mid-May collections of the business license tax have been received, and the year-to-date collections of approximately $6.1 million exceed our estimated budget as of $5.9 million. The city has also received an amount of $142,000 in rollback tax payments during 2018. These receipts are based on changes in land use, and a detailed description of the criteria associated with rollback taxes can also be found in page 4 of the report that you have. The last fiscal year that the city received rollback tax payments was in fiscal year 2008. Emission tax receipts as of May 15th have exceeded the budget revenue forecast by $375,000. Current receipts for the midday period total $417,400. Building permits of $471,200 are slightly in excess of the budgeted $450,000. Sales tax, meals tax, and lodging tax are currently on a path to meet or exceed their budgetary forecast levels, which will serve to reduce the use of fund balance in the 2018 budget. Unfortunately, we do expect a shortfall in the budget forecast in 2 significant areas. Recordation tax estimates were increased to $600,000 in fiscal year 18. This was based on prior year activity, which was strong at that time. However, there have not been as many large real estate transactions in the city during FY 2018, and the revenues received to date are $394,558,000 and tracking substantially, below the budgeted forecast. Telecommunications sales continue to decline, and we will miss the budgeted revenue forecast in FY 2018 of $1.7 million. The current year-to-date collection is $1,237,394, and this is based on collection activity. The staff estimates that the final receipts will range between between $1.61 to $1.68 million. Finally, the increase in the overall general fund expenditure activity from 0.7% from $67 million the first 3 quarters of 2017 to $68,200,000 in the first 3 quarters of 2018. The $68 million expenditure amount includes $40.8 million of general operating expenditures, $21.3 million transferred to schools, and $6.1 million to fund the debt service charges. The total amended fund expenditure budget as of March 31st, 2018 is $94.4 million. The expenditure activity at the close of March 2018 represented 72.3% of the amended budget. And the contingency fund, as Mrs. Jett mentioned, has reduced from $314,820 now to $224,820 as a result of the $90,000 committed to social services. I would be happy to entertain any questions that you might have at this particular point.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Are there any questions? I can say thank you to the staff.
Yeah.
We operate on a budget and within our budget.
Yes.
And we are blessed right now with a very good economy. Well, businesses are working for us. Mm-hmm. All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Baruti, City Manager's update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to highlight a couple issues, you'll see that the city has received an award from VML, our insurance provider, a 2018 Risk Management Performance Award. Mr. Whitley was down with folks to receive that award personally. I do want to thank Mr. Whitley and Lauren Cato, our former safety manager, for helping keeping our employees safe and for attracting that award from VML. I'll also highlight that the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience will again be with the city. This is round 2 of phase 1, we will have an open public conversation on Thursday, this Thursday at 7 p.m. at Dorothy Hart Community Center located at 408 Canal Street. So encourage all folks to participate. Again, that's an open public meeting with the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. Again, this Thursday, the 24th at 7 p.m. I'll also highlight that staff has begun tracking real-time counts on Friday and Saturday evenings and posting those counts, those parking counts to our Facebook page. As you can see from the data in front of you, it's about an average of 200 available spots at 6 p.m. on Friday and Saturday evenings in both the garage and the VRE lot. The VRE lot is available to general public at 6 p.m. and of course the garage is open all day. But the combination of those two facilities is producing about 200 vacant spots for folks to come see us, again, Friday and Saturday evenings. Again, we're offering real-time counts so folks are assured that they can find parking downtown throughout the summer. Also want to highlight the fact that Picnic in the Park is ongoing at Hurt Camp Park. Join us on Tuesdays for lunchtime in the park through the remainder of June. Also want to highlight and thank James Monroe Museum for loaning us a couple articles that you can see on our wall back here. They are a portrait of James Monroe and a visual of an 1856 view of Fredericksburg. Do thank, again, James Monroe Museum for those loans. And lastly, I want to commend Chief David Nye and the police department for their efforts to create a memorial, a lasting memorial at the police department. They unveiled the memorial to our fallen heroes last week. I do want to commend them again for their efforts to acknowledge Officer Moore, Sergeant Wright, Patrolman Mines, and Officer Todd Barr for all they gave to this community. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Berardi. Are there any questions for Mr. Berardi? Yes, Councilor Duffy.
I just want to put a little extra highlight and emphasis on the meeting at the Dorothy Hart Community Center Thursday night. If you know anyone who's interested in history and interested in the way that we present our story of Fredericksburg, please get them to come down and talk with us. We want, this is a big event. This is a big task that we have before us, and the more voices we have, the better. And just hope to see a lot of folks down there Thursday night.
Thank you, Councilor Duffy. I will concur with you on that and encourage people to attend. I'd like to mention the many Memorial Day events that are going to occur and remind us that within the city, there's a luminary at the Fredericksburg Confederate Cemetery on Saturday evening, and the beautiful luminarias at the Fredericksburg National Cemetery from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. That is an incredibly moving experience if you have not experienced it. On Monday morning, there will be a Memorial Day ceremony at the Confederate Cemetery, a Memorial Day procession at Riverfront Park at 10:45. This is honors the Union soldiers, and that starts at Riverfront Park at 10:45 and processes to the National Cemetery, where there will be a 12 p.m. program with a speaker. At 2:30 p.m. at the Fallen Heroes Memorial at George and Barton Street, there will be the Veterans Council, the Area Veterans Council, holds a service, and Mary Washington Healthcare supports a concert, a public free concert at 6 p.m. So we will not forget our fallen heroes and all the many who have served this nation so well this Memorial Day. If there's nothing more to come before this body, we are adjourned.